the PowerPoint up on the screen for us.
We'll start with a roll call.
Yes, sir. Mike Fan.
Here and present.
Wonderful. Mr. Jonathan Rocha is excused. Nicole Kennedy.
Here.
Arnold Urias.
Here.
Mr. Tony Teeters.
Here.
And Randy Goodman is also excused, correct? Yeah, he emailed us. And then our final vacancy has not been filled as of yet. So we have a quorum and everybody is here that isn't excused. So we're ready.
Can you give us an update on the final vacancy? What the
I think Amber actually has that update for us. if you
I
don't mind.
do. So this Thursday, the subcommittee on appointments is meeting, and they will go through applications that they've received. I actually don't know how many they have received, but they'll go through, and that'll be either when they pick someone or we'll be notified if they want to do an interview process again. So as soon as we get that information, we'll email everybody of what the next step is
Okay.
or who they picked. We'll
Great.
see.
Thank you. All right, 3A, approval of the November 1 minutes. If you've read them,
Motion to approve?
I'll second.
all right, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. And then item 3B, approval of the minutes from November 8th.
I'll motion.
Second.
All right, motion, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay, item 3C. Do you guys want to lead us here?
Yes, we can go ahead and intro this item. So let me get the PowerPoint to the right. There we go. All right, so based on the committee's meetings over the past couple of months and the special meeting in October, or was that November? I think that was November we had the special meeting. The staff, Amber, myself, worked with John Heine and also Mr. Mike McGinnis, and we came up with a memo that we thought the committee could use as it's a presentation kind of format for council. I think we discussed at the last meeting the need to come to council with a set of goals that they can then make sure that the committee's on the right path that they wanted. They can get their buy-in on the goals and kind of what you've done so far as it relates to mission, vision, definition, and then the short-term and long-term goals. So we put all of that into a format that is easily just handed to council and discussed with them. Before we dive into the document itself, the goal would be to come out of this meeting with a comments on any drafts or changes, and then put together a final document that can then be shared with council. And in light of the fact that many study sessions are already booked out for council through, I think, almost to the second quarter of next year.
Oh, wow.
The clerk advised us that it would be, if it's just a study session, which it would be, it'd just be a discussion with you and council, that we could have a joint meeting with council at the committee's next meeting. So that would be the first week of January, which is January 3rd. We'll have to talk about who's here and who's not. But felt like that was a really good format to have that conversation with council. And so this document and the documents that follow that we'll review during this meeting would be the conversation pieces for that discussion with council. So any questions before we dive into the document itself? Okay, great.
Nope.
So, and I think you have copies of okay, fabulous. So I'm looking at the, oh, great. And we do have okay, perfect. Let's see. Fabulous. Okay, so that's the goals section. But before we get into the goals, I want to focus on the first page with the workforce housing logo here and mission and vision. So the mission and vision was pretty simple because the committee voted at the last meeting and approved that language. So I'm going to move down to the workforce definition. And wanted to point out that based on the conversation at the last meeting, looking at about the 80%, and I'm going to have Nicole speak to this in a moment, but in reviewing this document before the meeting, I feel like we can change some of this paragraph to move the goal of the housing down into the housing definition area. So that second sentence will just bump down into the housing section. So as we look at the workforce definition, let's focus on that minus that second sentence, but feel like that kind of captures the discussion that we had at the last meeting. And at this point in time, I'd like to turn the floor over to Ms. Nicole Kennedy to talk about a handout that she provided at each of your stations prior to the meeting commencing. So Nicole, if you would.
Thank you, Chelsea. Okay, since our last meeting, we talked about differing opinions on what does it mean to really define between the ULI definition and the HUD definition. And since that time, I did a little bit of research. So I'm just going to read the letter that everyone on the committee has here. So I would like to propose that the committee adopt the Urban Land Institute's definition of workforce housing at 60 to 120% of area median income. According to their website, ULI is the oldest and largest network of cross-disciplinary real estate and land use experts in the world. Their mission is to shape the future of the built environment for transformative impact in communities worldwide. Based on our current median income of $76,700 for a family of 4, this scale would start at 46 and go to 92 and change. Since our last meeting, I spoke with several people in the state, including property managers, nonprofit executives, and the Arizona Department of Housing. They all agreed that there is a significant gap for those earning 60 to 80% that is not being adequately addressed. If the committee adopts HUD's definition at 80 to 120%, this leaves a gap for the very population we have stated in all of our language to date that we want to serve, including local firefighters whose starting pay is $47,000, local public school certified teachers whose starting pay is $52,000, including the Prop 301 anticipated bonus. So my ask is that we don't leave behind these people that are protecting and serving our community.
Okay, so since the HUD definition leaves such a large range, where does that, where do we go with that? So I'm a little curious on where we land and what is our target.
So I think the proposal on the floor is that the definition in on the document that we prepared is defining workforce as those that earn between 60% and 60% and 120% of the area's median income. So just increasing that range to capture those gross income earners.
Got it.
Because the gross income of the 80% is around $61,000 annually. And Nicole's right, with the firefighters and the teachers, they are below that. And the 120%, I mean, the 100% right now of area median income is $76,700. So, you know, that's not a whole lot of money either. So the 120 cap would capture those that, to Nicole's point, make the 92K, which also, you know, that working group does struggle to find housing as well in this area.
I have a question.
Could you speak into the mic, Arnold? Sorry.
If I understand this correctly, we're proposing to adopt the floor of the ULI of 60% and the ceiling of HUD of 120%?
That is the definition of ULI, is 60 to 120%.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
But, and there's no variance between their cap at 120% versus HUD's, they're not using a different set of numbers, it would
That's
arrive
true.
to a different income?
Yeah, they have the same upper end cap.
Understood, thank you.
Yeah, it's the upper limit that I struggle. I agree with the lower limit. That makes perfect sense. So we capture those in need. The ceiling is, if I've got a household making 92, I don't know how much help they really need.
I actually have a comment on that because I think we discussed at the last meeting, those who make a lower wage actually have more funding available to them outside of their income, whereas people that are just outside of getting any kind of other help from the state, anything else, they only have their income to rely on. So they're not eligible for, food stamps. They're not eligible for any insurance and whatnot. So these folks are kind of in that gap between making, well enough to do, great without any assistance, but they don't make less enough to be okay on their, to apply and make those other outside funding sources.
Okay.
So, Mike, just doing a little quick math. I know we if you look at the rental market, it's crazy, right? But if you're making 92,000 as a family, 30%, including your utilities, would be 2,300 a month. So
Yeah, I did that.
yeah, it's still like there's just not a lot of that either.
Yeah.
Really.
True. Or it's limited.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm gonna jump to a conclusion that as we move forward, there is going to be some vetting, no matter who gets assistance, and so those with a higher need is, I'm going to presume, is going to take precedence over with someone with a lower need anyway. So,
Correct.
is this something we need to vote on, or?
Well, I would like to have a document that everybody's comfortable with to go forward for council discussion. So, and again, this is the goals and the definitions, they may change over time. So this will be something that the committee kind of uses as a quick look at kind of where we are to date. So if it needs to change in the future, that's fine. If we want to put the range in there and discuss it with council, like, hey, we put this range in here, but here's what we're thinking about that, and punt it to them. What are your thoughts, council?
Yeah, speaking for myself, I agree with this. I would suggest that we add some, down and dirty language that there is some assumption or presumption that a vetting process will identify those with greater need. What I would be concerned about is taking some backlash for saying, wait a minute, somebody making $92,000 is eligible for assistance here. That I think the potential of criticism would be raised. So as long as there's some language in there that also talks about the vetting process or prioritizing those of need is included, I think we're good, in my opinion.
You need to prioritize those with the greatest need first.
Right.
And then, because otherwise, it's like a lot of the folks in the low end we're not talking about. A lot of the folks that are in the low end, they get all the subsistence from the government and the state. The people just into the end where they don't qualify and end up earning less than the people on the lower end. So I think we have to be very careful.
Yeah.
When the decisions are made, you don't want to have somebody earning 92,000 get 10,000 and somebody earning 60,000 get 15 because it's still not.
Right.
You know.
To Chelsea's point.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So that's just my stake.
Great. Well, we can definitely add some language in there regarding need prioritization with programs offered.
Yeah.
And the vetting process to identify those with the greater need. So are you all comfortable with me adding that into the draft document that you discussed with council?
Yeah.
I would like to thank Ms. Kennedy for putting this together because it does broaden the spectrum of eligibility. And I think that that's a critical component there. And to Mr. Phan's point, what we could do is not necessarily reinvent the wheel. For example, USDA has specific language in their underwriting guidelines pertaining to eligibility of the purchase of a primary residence with no down payment. And what they have included in their guidelines is that the underwriters and the lenders are held accountable to document that the applicant wouldn't have the traditional means to qualify for a conventional mortgage in order to be eligible for, their 100% financing. So there are plenty of examples out there that we can adopt and implement to address Mr. Phan's concern, to make sure that we've implemented a vetting process that's appropriate.
Great. Thank you for those comments.
I think you have consensus.
Okay, fabulous. Well, we'll move forward with that workforce definition. As it relates to the last sentence, workforce including those employed in occupations vital to a community's functioning across areas like education, parenthetical teachers, healthcare, nurses, public safety, police officers, firefighters, construction, and other key services. I feel like that captures the conversation that we had last time. Everybody comfortable with that? Okay, wonderful. And now as it relates to workforce housing. So there's some language that in addition to the sentence from the above paragraph mentioning that, the goal is to offer no more than 30% of household gross income, including utilities. I'd like to see that down in the workforce housing definition. But then I missed a line that is found in the fact sheet where it talks about using HUD's median family income for the Prescott Valley area, starting at fiscal year 23 being $76,700 and giving an amount. I know last time the committee discussed this point, the committee wants this to be kind of an approachable, like, well, what does that mean? I don't know what 80% of area median income is. What's the brass tacks of that? And you wanted to see a number. So my proposition would be to add the target monthly workforce housing rent/mortgage amount of $1,184, which is what we calculated using the HUD's definition, et cetera. And that language will take, I'll point it out when we get there, but on the fact sheet, we have that sentence. But in addition to what's there already with adding that kind of 1184 number, is everybody comfortable with the definition?
Chelsea, do you think since we're adjusting the lower end to 60%, we should also adjust it to, would be 1150 if we
Oh,
made that commensurate?
sure.
Yeah, good point.
Yep. Oh, yes, Mr. Matt Pedracki. You're going to need to talk into the microphone.
Just looking at the definition, that last part says who are employed within a specific area. I don't know what that means. It could be a geographical area like the greater Prescott area or specific job categories. Can maybe we clean that up a little bit?
Good point. Thank you.
Okay, changes noted. Is everybody comfortable with what we've discussed on the workforce housing definition?
Yep.
Dropping the amount to 1150, having that kind of succinct in, look, this is kind of what we're looking at.
Yep.
Okay, I feel like we're good on that one. So let's move on to the goals then. We're going to start with the short-term goals, and we're looking at the 1 to 3 year range for short-term goals. And again, this would be for council consideration, and at the study session where the committee discusses this entire document with council, the idea is to say, council, we're going to come forward to you at a voting session and get you to weigh in on these things. And taking Nicole's input at the last meeting, we identified some objectives that we had already discussed as a committee and kind of added those in to flesh out, what exactly we mean by each of the goals. So number one, pursuing a full-time workforce housing facilitator position or engage a third party to act in this role. that was a goal, and the objective would be to identify the funding sources, and that could be stakeholder contributions, grants, matching city funds, et cetera. Are you all okay with how we worded that? Any comments on objectives? Did we miss anything?
I would ask to, I guess I want the best opportunity to engage council.
Yes.
So what I would add, because I can speak directly to that, is some match funding sources have already been pledged.
Yes.
So they know we're not asking for the city to exclusively fund this.
Yes.
We would ask them participate because we believe specifically fire and police will benefit from this, much less public works staff and the like. So participate, yes. Fund it 100% themselves? No, we're not asking for that. So
Gotcha.
I think some language in there to encourage mayor and council to support this would be helpful.
Do you feel like that should be identified in the goal language, or do you want the objective to be expanded? Because we did say stakeholder contributions as a funding source, but in the goal, would you rather it be worded to say pursue match funding for a full-time workforce housing facilitator?
Yeah, that's fine, and we could leave them, what the match is, open at this point, because we've not identified. I think our short-term goal number 2 is going to help that also. If we can
Yeah.
get a stakeholder group together and to jump ahead to objective 1 and short-term goal number 2, my comment on that would be we should already identify the initial invitees. We can't force them, of course. But I think we've got a group, I think I wrote down a group of about 8 that are obvious
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
that stakeholder group.
Yeah, we can, would you like to see this page identify that group?
I think we should, as whether it's an example or say initial invitees, because I think the committee would all agree, Dignity Health, Yavapai College, Prescott Unified School District, CAFMA, the City of Prescott. I've got them written down. I just don't know off the top of my
Sheriff's
head.
Office, I know we had
The
talked
Sheriff's
about-
Office, that's right. But
Chamber to represent the small.
yeah, the Chamber of Commerce to represent small business. Right, thank you. So I think we can
county,
all
yeah.
agree the initial invitees will include this group, and then we can expand from there. We don't get too carried away.
Sure.
The same, under the same, but I think that stakeholder group will all, or most of them anyway, will come to the table with saying, well, oh, yeah, this is important. This is important for this community. I'll pitch in.
Yeah, great. Okay, we can definitely expand the third-party stakeholder meeting to include initial invitees. So with short-term goal number 1, everyone comfortable with pursue match funding for a full-time workforce housing facilitator position or engage a third party to act in this role with the objective of, number 1, identifying funding sources. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of nods, so we'll move on to number 2. Formalize a third-party stakeholder organization group, and the objectives would be to, 1, hold a third-party stakeholder meeting, initial invitees, Dignity, Yavapai College, PUSD, CAFMA, City of Prescott, YCSO, Chamber, and County, Yavapai County.
And I'll look at my notes, and I think there was 1 or 2 more that I had
Okay.
identified earlier.
Okay, great. And then objective number 2, gauge interest and select organization type. So the idea is that the third-party stakeholder meeting, we get together, we discuss the issue, discuss the importance of solving it together regionally. And the second thing on the agenda for that meeting would be, what's the interest in forming a regional organizational framework to get this work done. So the idea would be, Let's talk about community land trusts. Let's talk about a regional housing authority. Let's talk about these different organizational formats that can move this ball forward for us together. Everybody comfortable with goal number 2 and the 2 objectives? Anything we left out? Okay. Item number 3, general plan housing element draft. Thank you to the subcommittee, Nicole, Tony, and John, who isn't here. We looked at that last Thursday together, and we'll come forward to the committee. Because of the joint meeting with council, I figured, Amber and I figured that having a special meeting after that during the month of January to review the document would be good. Felt like it would be too much paperwork at this meeting to try to cram it in. So anyhow, another short-term goal is to get that housing element draft back to the general plan committee for their consideration. And that's a very achievable short-term goal. So any questions on that one? Comments? Okay.
I do have a question. You're
Yeah.
going to email that to the committee before we meet, right? to look at
Yes. So the subcommittee will receive the revised draft just to make sure we captured all of the comments correctly, and then we'll get it out to the overall committee once we have that special meeting scheduled. Okay, short-term goal number 4, create 2 separate incentive packets. And objective 1 is an incentive packet to encourage developers and builders. And then the task, this is, I think, only one of 2 goals that has a task associated with it. We had discussed meeting with developers and builders and other entities to understand best practices and incentives that encourage their involvement. So we didn't want to put together an incentive packet that everybody thinks is ridiculous. So wanted to get their input as to, hey, what incentivizes you to do these projects? So objective number 1 is for a packet to encourage developers and builders, and objective number 2 is a packet that helps members of the workforce so that they know what's available in the community. I'm struggling to find housing. What are my options?
And would objective 2 include down payment assistance and things like that?
Yes, the
So
incentive
basically,
packet
this
would
is
include.
What I've coined as looking at from both sides of the fence.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
Any questions on goal number 4? Okay. Moving on to goal number 5, research the best financial program solutions for the city and stakeholders. And the objective underneath that one is investigate financial programs, including down payment assistance, mortgage assistance, rental assistance, and rent-to-own options. Questions, comments on this goal or objective? Anything we missed?
Yeah, I would say objective 4.2 and objective 5 are very much related, but
Yes.
they approach it from a little different viewpoint. I agree.
Okay. Objective number 6 relates to the accessory dwelling unit code revision that Mr. Worley is working on with his planning division team. And that objective is working with planning staff to propose code modifications that encourage ADU construction for long-term rentals. And as we discussed at the last meeting, there isn't really a way to restrict what people do with the ADUs they build on their property. The overall boon to the issue is that it provides more housing stock in the area. You know, and it's an easy economics with supply and demand. If you have more stock, then people have more options. Any questions on goal number 6 or the objective? Again, this is something that we feel is a easy win for the committee. So it's really good to have some really attainable goals here.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Maybe that's for Mr. Worley, but would this language include the rehabilitation of existing, like the old carriage houses and the, okay. Okay.
Great.
Thanks.
The record will say George not.
Okay.
George nodded, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mechanic?
I just wanted to clarify one thing on this and make a comment. When I was at a meeting a couple months ago, and there was a discussion about possibly allowing an additional use for the ADUs for workforce housing. And I thought Mr. Pondraki said that was legal to do that. But then I just heard that we can't restrict. So,
Incentive rather than a restriction.
no, what I'm talking about is not an incentive. I'm talking about an addition. Right now, ADUs can be used for two uses, is my understanding. One is for family use, and the other is for short-term use. I'm talking about adding a third use for workforce housing, not an incentive, an additional use. So I want to see if Mr. Pondraki could comment if that is legal to do that, because I thought he said it was.
Yeah, that's the code change we're recommending, to allow for long-term rentals, which would.
No, I said workforce housing, not long-term rentals that mean for anybody. I'm not talking about long-term use for anybody. I'm talking about long-term use for workforce housing. That's what this committee is about, is to provide for workforce housing, not for housing.
Understood. Why don't we have Mr. Petracchi weigh in?
Thank you. Not entirely sure I understand the issue. I think the last time it came up, the question came from Councilwoman Contalme, whether or not we can create an ordinance that would only allow for ADUs being used for workforce housing, and I felt uncomfortable with that. If I don't feel uncomfortable necessarily if you want to add a third option that ADUs can be used for workforce housing, but I think it's already contained in the definition of allowing an ADU.
And that's Mr. Mechanic's point, is not allowing long-term rentals other than for workforce.
Right.
And you're saying that's no.
I think you run into some major private property rights issues when you do that.
Yeah, I think we're drilling too far into the details. I mean, we were talking about some general goals at this point. How we achieve the goal and what ultimately comes out certainly needs to address Mr. Mechanic's concerns there. I agree with that 100%. But I think we're drilling too far in the detail right now, maybe?
Okay, but then I would just suggest, instead of saying that you want council to have an ADU program for long-term rentals, maybe you can just put something in there and try to have those for workforce housing, because there's nothing in what your proposal is about workforce housing. So
Right.
if you make it general and say that you'd like to see the ADUs being used for workforce housing, you're addressing what your issue is here.
Yeah. So what you're suggesting is change long-term rentals to workforce housing. Is that what I'm hearing? On the goal? You're not looking
You
at
can leave the long-term rental in there, but, especially for workforce housing, or put something in there to serve workforce housing. You're not necessarily restricting it for other uses if you can't do that, but at least say that you want council to look into how ADUs can be used for workforce housing. My
Thank you.
understanding is that's one of the things Mr. Worley is looking at, is to suggest to this committee and to council how the ADU proposal can be used to incentivize or somehow, perform for workforce housing.
Got it.
And whether or not you can add additional incentives if somebody can commit to using it for workforce housing.
Okay,
No,
good
I-
comments. You
Yeah, I
agree?
think with that, thank you. We'll add ADU construction for long-term rentals to serve workforce housing. I think that's appropriate.
Committee? That sound good?
I like the language you said earlier about increasing supply. So maybe that's,
Okay.
we use that, like increasing supply for workforce housing.
Okay.
I don't know.
I affirm Ms. Kennedy's comments on there, and to address the precautionary statement that, we have, I think on the last meeting, we talked about how developers will tend to gravitate to projects that yield more profit and production. The precautionary statement with the ADUs is, while we can't necessarily discriminate their uses, and we have to be considerate of the compliance factor in this, you can consider the limitations on how short-term that occupancy can be. So, for example, if the unintended consequence is that landowners decide that Airbnb short-term rentals are tremendously more profitable, and then the use gravitates towards vacation rentals instead of what our intended use was for workforce housing, we could consider a limitation on the rental. So it could be like a minimum of a 1-month rental, for example. And then if you're limiting the term, then you're not discriminating against the demographic or the use, which opens up a more compliant means to ensure that the ADU will be used for workforce housing, if that makes sense.
Interesting thought.
Can we limit the term, though? I thought we have some pretty strict state regulations about
Yeah.
short-term
Yeah,
rentals.
there's some limitations, and I think we'll have that as a broader discussion when this particular item hits your guys' agenda, probably in February, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think again, I think we're drilling into the details. I think our goal is to open up some new options. Now, how that achieves without having unintended consequences, the devil will be in the details.
Okay, well, with those changes, everyone comfortable with short-term goal number 6 and the objective?
As modified? Yeah.
As modified, fabulous. Increasing supply and then long-term rentals to serve workforce housing. Fabulous. Okay, short-term goal number 7, create a workforce housing policy for council consideration. So we have 3 objectives that we culled together from prior discussions. Objective 1, research ways to prioritize workforce housing projects within current city policies, i.e. water management policy, as well as in current city codes, i.e. the building and wildland urban interface codes. Again, these are going to take a lot of discussions and how and who it gets proposed to, but that's one objective for a workforce housing policy is, hey, council, let's prioritize this within these policies and codes. Objective number 2 would be to research voluntary new development contributions. There was significant conversation related to enforcing and mandating that new projects contribute to workforce housing. So again, that'll need to be researched, but the idea is to research what voluntary contributions might look like for housing projects, to include percentage of workforce housing or other contributions. So that would be like a in lieu of fee if people want to contribute and don't have housing in their project. And then objective number 3 for a policy would be a revitalization incentive policy. This goes back to Mr. Urias commenting on how when people fix up their existing housing, it can increase, both how people feel as well as increase property values. So again, a workforce housing policy could encompass all of those items in addition to other items, but that's kind of what we started with. Comments on this short-term goal? Or the objectives? Anything we missed? Look okay? All right. Short-term goal number 8, create a program similar to the Yavapai County Home of My Own program. Objective 1 would be to meet with the building division on feasibility. Yavapai County has a lot of additional housing sites that work well for canned plans. Not to say that Prescott doesn't have any, but we have other considerations too. So we would need to look at the feasibility, but also, how it could be modified to work for us. And then objective 2 would be to research the cost benefit in initiating the program. Questions, comments? Look good? Okay. No, item or short-term goal number 9, community outreach, and this is something that we'll review after we finish with this item. But objective number 1 is to create a communications plan, including but not limited to an education packet with Mr. John Heine and the communications office. And then task number 2 is engage with local groups and clubs using standardized messaging. Sound good? Oh, thank you. Awesome. I'm just going to put this there. Questions? Look good? Okay. Moving on to the last short-term goal, number 10, set up a fund account for workforce housing. And the objectives would be to, similar to Change for the Better, recommend that council direct staff to create an account. And then objective number 2 is explore ways to seek funding such as donations and whatnot. And that speaks to Mr. Teeter's point at the last meeting, you know, can we go out in the community and ask for funds? So again, this is just a goal to research and potentially recommend to council. Okay, that concludes the short-term goal list. Anything we missed? Anything you feel like we need to expand or strike? All right.
I just have a comment.
Yeah.
There is so much research that's involved. This is so time consuming. If council doesn't approve the hiring of somebody, we're going to be just not making any progress. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Thank you. Took the words right out of my mouth. Thank you guys for putting that. You have reduced and captured all of our comments very, very well. So thank you for
Fabulous.
great document.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, well, let's move on to the long-term goal list. It's much shorter, and this is intended to be achievable within 3 to 5 years. And the first long-term goal is facilitate or partner in creating a tangible product. And then the objective underneath that one would be to identify partners and project specifics, you know, land, product type, et cetera. Everyone comfortable with that? Okay. And then long-term goal number 2, create a regional workforce housing strategic plan. So using, in our short-term goal list, the stakeholders group and whatever organizational framework comes out of that, using that group as the group to create the regional strategic plan. The objective, once that's formed, then the long-term goal can start and basically create a draft. Everyone comfortable with that? And then last, long-term goal is really identify the number of units needed. Put a quantity in there for us. We have Prescott's numbers from our stakeholders in the surveys we recently did. But, you know, that doesn't speak to what other communities near us also need. And I think having the grasp on, okay, as a whole, what are we looking at would be good. So using data already collected, research future projected needs. Everybody comfortable with that long-term goal?
I have 2 questions, Chelsea.
Yes.
On the number 2, regional plan, is regional referring to outside of Prescott, not just Prescott?
Correct.
Okay, so should our group of stakeholders then include, you know, maybe in a second phase, regional partners as well as Prescott?
Nicole, I think the group that I mentioned are regional partners. I think CAFMA is a great example. That's CAFMA's not City of Prescott.
Sure.
Department.
So, yeah, Yavapai County. I mean, and this is a regional problem. I mean, thank goodness Prescott has taken the lead and a leadership role in this, but it's not just a Prescott problem. We want to address it regionally.
Yeah. Yeah, and we do also have Yavapai County, Yavapai College, but yeah, it'll be expanded into those regional partners. And if there are additional regional partners that you can think of, we can add them to the list as well.
Yeah.
Great.
And then my other question is on the number of units needed. Our survey response rate was like 15%, is that
That was
correct?
very low. Yeah.
I'm wondering if if the committee's open to this, if we could get a list of those that didn't respond and maybe try to give them a nudge to get some more data. Do you
Yeah.
find that valuable, committee, or?
We can definitely pursue it. As far as a list of people that didn't respond, we cast a really broad net. So we sent it to the chamber to send it to all of their members. So, yeah, I mean, we could ask them to send it again, but I don't know if, yeah, we can research that and see what we can do. And then also, when the stakeholder meeting happens, using the survey that we've already created and saying, hey, regional stakeholders, we need you to help us get this information. Here's the tool.
I'd like to take a moment to comment on that if I could. I think there's tremendous importance in Ms. Kennedy's comment here, and in so much that I'd like to volunteer that if that list is obtained, I would personally dedicate time to follow up on that and identify additional corporate citizens, such as Freeport, the mine in Baghdad. That income is a perfect example of demographics that are working just outside of Prescott, and they could be looking to raise their family somewhere that's more within a reasonable commute of Prescott. And so with the largest tax-paying corporate citizen of the state of Arizona being right at our back door, that's just one example of additional follow-up, because it ties into our goal of identifying how many units we truly need. And if we don't have respondents responding with that data, then it's kind of the garbage in, garbage out. We don't have the correct number of units anticipated.
I'm hearing another objective that we need to add under this long-term goal. Objective 2 would be to identify and reach out to regional stakeholders. Okay. And of course, that doesn't have to happen in 3 years. It can start now, but just mentioning that, reaching out to those folks. Okay, great. Any other discussion on this one?
When I looked at this, it says identify the number of units needed, and it wasn't clear to me. I thought you were talking about needed for the city of Prescott. The previous item mentions regional needs, but this doesn't mention regional. And I know one of the first things this committee did was try to determine what the need was in the city of Prescott. And so that's why I was a little confused about that. So if you're talking about regional areas, that's different than determining a need in the city of Prescott. And I think that we need to publicize the fact of what the need is. A lot of people may not know the needs, thousands of units. And I think if you're going to be wanting to get a paid employee, I think one of the major sales pitches you can use is what the demand is, and with some numbers. And you have numbers now. They may not be complete numbers, but they're for some of the largest nonprofit employers in the city. And I think you should use those numbers and clarify this. It would be nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comment on item number 3? Any recommended changes?
I think we're good.
Okay. All right, so on the bottom of that sheet, or the next section, we just mentioned that we're recommending the Joint Workforce Housing Committee and Council study session for this committee's next regular meeting, which would be January 3rd. And I recognize that is right after New Year's. Everybody available?
I'm not.
I'm
out of state.
I had a feeling you would.
I'm here.
Okay.
I mean,
My calendar's still loading.
I think
we'll poll the committee, and if we need to bump it, we can.
Well, here's my concern with bumping it is, in January, council immediately goes into goal setting and prioritizing, and then shortly after that, the budget discussions are starting. So I think it's important to get before council as soon as possible, frankly,
Okay,
and find out where they're at and
okay.
where they want to go.
So perhaps we'll keep the January 3rd date, but if members of council also decide that they're not, or that they're not available during that meeting time, then we might poll the committee to see when an alternate would be.
Okay.
I'm not available on the 3rd.
Not available on the 3rd, okay.
I think Nicole would make a great spokesperson for us, though.
Fabulous.
Does the rest of the committee agree?
Who could argue that?
So if we'll ask, the three of us will step back and, as if she stepped forward to volunteer?
I guess I deserve that after another.
That's right.
Okay,
Does that work for you?
sure.
Okay.
All right, fabulous. So we'll shoot for the 3rd, and based on council's availability, we'll go from there.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, and then the next section is the recommended action that we'll be asking for council at a future voting meeting. So the study session is just explaining what the committee has done so far, where you are, and where you want to go, and then what particular action items we pulled from the goals would be asking them to approve the mission, vision, definition, and workforce housing definition would be one motion, and then move to approve the committee's short-term and long-term goal list, and then move to approve the specific recommendation of pursuing a full-time workforce housing facilitator. And then the last motion that we would ask is approve the recommendation to create a workforce housing account in the general fund.
Perfect.
That all
I would
good?
suggest that some of those may get massaged between.
Language-wise?
Yeah.
Okay.
Between the study session and once we
Oh,
get some
absolutely.
feedback from council, but for now, they look great.
Okay, fabulous.
Do you guys, everybody agree?
Okay, great. Well, we're doing really good on time.
Cool.
Let's go to the community outreach plan. So this would be also presented to council for consideration. If they approve the short-term goal list, then this would be another item, and I actually need to add that as community outreach plan. We would want them to vote on this as well. And thanks to Mr. John Heine for putting this together for us. So the base document here, the outreach plan, didn't change other than we expanded the in the first sentence there the workforce categories. So we say police, firefighter, nurses, teachers, and other professions that are critical to a community's functioning. But other than that, the phase 1, phase 2 language, key messages, those remain unchanged from the previous version the committee reviewed. Any comments or changes? I'm getting a lot of consensus. Looks
Yep.
good. Okay. Let's move on then to the talking points. So this is another item that was not changed except for expanding the workforce categories. This is basically the same document. We expanded the categories, and then at the end of the document, on the second page of the document, we included language as to the negative. What happens if we don't do anything about workforce? We heard from the committee at the last meeting that was really important. As to what happens if we don't. So, but other than those two small changes, nothing else changed within the document itself. Comments?
I have read and listened to various reports talking about one of the largest threat to rural America communities is providing workforce housing. I mean, I'm hopeful that we can find data and source material out there that can address that. Here's what the such and such institute found, and hard facts on how important this really is.
Okay. So you'd like to see that kind of as in the introduction area of this talking point?
That's what I'm thinking. If we can, I wish I could remember it. My memory's getting worse and worse.
Well,
Where I've
yeah,
read that.
Mr. McGinnis is stellar at research, so I anticipate that he'll be able to find a credible source of information that'll speak to that.
Perfect.
And I would propose that we incorporate that into the short second paragraph there before we move into,
Bullet point.
what it does.
Okay.
Okay. So with that addition, any questions, comments, changes? Okay. Let's move on to, all right, so the fact sheet is the document that the committee spent the most time on at the last regular meeting. And we moved things around. We changed mostly in the what is workforce housing section. And then, of course, we added the goals at the end and the mission and the vision. So, and we also added that statement or that paragraph talking about the negative, what happens when we don't do anything about workforce. Did I miss something? Okay, great. So with that, I'd like to hone in on the what is workforce housing section. And if you look at the second to the last paragraph there on that first page of the fact sheet, that's the definition that I had proposed. That's the language I had proposed moving into the workforce housing definition section of the document that we intend to take to council. So it provides that number 1184, which will change to 1150, but kind of really honing in on this is exactly what we mean when we say we want affordable workforce housing. So a couple of changes based on the last meeting was that essential job definition. We removed that and just simply mention jobs that support a community's functioning. So that second paragraph there under the what is workforce housing? So we say that it's people who work in jobs like teachers, nurses, police, firefighters, as well as those within hospitality and retail service industries and other professions that are critical to a community's functioning, such as construction workers. So we tried to hit them all. We obviously can't hit every single industry, but I feel like it's broad enough that it captures it.
Yep.
Anything else that we need to point out on this, Amber? The first paragraph under what is workforce housing, there was discussion about, well, we need to make sure they know it's not Section 8. We need to make sure that it's differentiated from things that are negative in people's mind about workforce housing. So in the first paragraph, we just simply say, last sentence, this is different from a government subsidized housing program. I hope that captures it.
Chelsea, I believe it does because it continues to define, workforce instead of those that are reliant on subsidies. But on the topic of updates, just the second to the last paragraph, in addition from 1184 to 1150, you'll need to please include the ULI.
Right. Yeah, that paragraph above will be revised to the 60 to 120 and the ULI. Got it. Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry. Do you think it would be helpful to add different from a government subsidized housing program that supports, a lower income bracket or something, just to be extra clear there. Because it is a different,
Do we, any comments on that, committee? Do we need to specifically mention?
No, I think if we start to specify, then we start to open up our target for criticism.
So, to Ms.
I'm pretty
Kennedy's,
sure anybody knows knows how to, that's seen what's happened in with the subsidized housing. They're gonna know what government subsidized housing is.
right,
I don't think you have to spell out each individual criteria to get on it.
so with Ms. Kennedy's addition, the sentence would read, "This is different from a government subsidized housing program that supports a lower income bracket." That feels very clean, very succinct. Okay? I think those are the biggest changes that we made to this document.
And we added the negative.
Right, and at the top of the third page of that document, we did add, what happens without acting on the workforce housing issue. Recruitment and retention of quality service providers will continue to erode. Prescott residents will experience longer wait times, reduced service levels, and in some cases, have to go outside of the area for services, which we all know for medical, they usually do anyways. There may also be an overall increased cost of services locally. Prescott may experience less diversity in population, and service providers will be disconnected from the community. And the meaning of that statement, and I appreciate Mr. Heine for helping us word that, is when you don't have people that live inside the community that they work inside, they're disassociated. They
Right.
they don't really have as much buy-in in what happens there. So. Okay, and then remembering that this is the fact sheet that will, kind of be a broad brush, we kept the mission and the vision. And then as far as the short-term and long-term goals, we just stated the goals. We didn't get into the objectives.
Right.
If you guys feel like we should expand that to include objectives, we'd be happy to. Any comments on that?
No, I think when you get into the details of that, that's where you, that's the question and answer part of the
Right.
discussion.
Right. Awesome. So we've gone through all of the elements of the community outreach plan. Mr. Heine is here if you have any questions. But with those changes, is everyone comfortable with this document being included in the other document we reviewed and going forward to council as a proposition?
I think it looks great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks, John.
Great. Okay, well, with that, I think we're on to future agenda items. So we discussed the next meeting being the joint meeting with council. Then we'll have a special meeting to just review the general plan housing element in January. And then this isn't an agenda item for this committee, but I'd like everybody to be thinking about a spokesperson or a couple members that would go then to the general plan committee at their meeting at the end of January. I think it's around the 29th or 30th of January, to kind of present and walk them through the housing element draft that this committee moves forward for their consideration.
And that would be clearly one of you from the subcommittee that would,
Okay.
in fact, it would be nice if the whole subcommittee attended and then you guys assign one spokesperson.
Well, I'm available for that. So.
Okay. Great. We'll
You
work with.
volunteer John since he's not here.
Oh,
Yeah, I know. I can tell he'll be there.
great.
If he's alive, he'll be there.
Fabulous. And then at the February meeting, depending on the outcome of council and kind of what they have input, if they have some specific drafts, we may review these documents again together based on their feedback. And then Mr. Worley will bring forward the ADUs. So that's kind of what the next month and some time look like. Does that sound good for everybody? Okay, fabulous. All right, Mr. Chair, we are then on to our staff updates. And the biggest and most important is that with my promotion to Community Development Director, I felt the need to have someone else be able to focus on the committee and its work. So Mr. Michael McGinnis will join Amber as co-liaison for this committee. And I will still intend to attend as often as I can, support the committee's work, support Mike and Amber in the support of the committee, and I'm definitely available if there's anything I can do to help. But as far as facilitating the meetings and all that, that'll be Mr. Michael McGinnis and Amber, of course. Thank you, Amber, for everything you do for us. So that's the biggest announcement. Did we have any?
I do have one. Yes. So wanted to check in March, we got a request from our Tourism Advisory Committee to see if we'd be willing to switch and have our meeting the second Wednesday so they could have theirs the first. So just wanted to check. We can send out an email so everyone can check then too, but just wanted to put on everyone's radar that they requested it.
That's spring break, that's why they're asking for that.
It's what?
Spring break.
So they actually have, from my understanding, they have a conference that all of their all of their staff will be at on the second week. So they were just hoping to, use the room.
Second week of March, what date again? Right now, we have the
Wednesday,
6th,
second Wednesday.
right?
Yep. So let
13th.
me get to March. So instead of it being the 6th, it would be the 13th.
I may not be here. I don't know yet.
So we can send that out and then kind of get feels, but just when I put on everyone's radar and we could check. I know it's a couple months out.
Yeah, works for me, but I'm just one member, so.
All right. That's all I have.
Well, Chelsea, thank you for all of your guidance and support and wisdom. We hate to see you go, but speaking for myself, I knew this was coming. So you are wearing way too many hats, so.
My office is right next to Chelsea.
So if you yell at him,
Perfect.
she'll hear it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll talk.
perfect.
Yeah, again, my name's Michael McInnes, and I've been here with the city for about a year. My job is as the CDBG coordinator, which is the Community Development Block Grant coordinator. And so the space that I've been in is really, kind of the tier down as income level goes from workforce housing. So I've been working on really trying to understand and how best to help affordable housing. I think it parallels really well with workforce housing. What else? Lived in Prescott since 2007. Raised my family here. It's changed quite a bit, in the last 15, 16 years, less schools, older population. And I'm just excited to work on a committee like this that, it is a lot of family focus. Workforce, when I think workforce, I think, I'd love to see more families come to this area and make this place their home. So anyway, I'm excited, and I have the energy and the time to really, look at this and do some stuff, hopefully. So with that, thanks.
Great, Mike, thank you. And Mike has been instrumental in helping myself and the subcommittee with getting the data updates for the general plan element. He's also doing a lot of research for the planning division in other elements of the general plan. So he's got a lot of experience as it relates to the research and in Prescott. So we're grateful to have him step up to this role.
Well, it's my thoughts on your comment went immediately to Elliot. Elliot Pollock came up here and talked about economic development and growth of your community, and so his comment was just that: the very people that want to stifle growth because they like Prescott just the way it is don't realize that as you stifle growth, you change the dynamics of your community because you push out families. It's all the supply-demand curve. You limit supply and don't affect demand. Prescott is always going to be a beautiful place and be in demand. And so we can't modify demand much. Those people that want to modify supply, unfortunately, the unintended consequences are very bad. So, and one of the biggest ones is you push families out of your community.
Okay.
All right.
That's it.
I think we're done. Thank you.
All right. Thank
Good
you.
meeting.
Yeah, very
Good
good.
luck.
Paybacks are hell.